One thing I've always wanted, and I've mentioned time and time again, even though I know it won't come to this iteration of the Octatrack, is Overbridge for the Octatrack. So today I wanted to show you a tip that I've been using to get audio over USB with an Octatrack and another elektron device. Now, know that this will work with any synthesizer. It doesn't have to be an Octatrack, but what you do need is a elektron device that does have Overbridge. And if you have an audio interface with tons of inputs, you probably don't need this. But say you only have a Digitact or a Syntakt and another random synth, this can be really fun and really useful. Plus, I wanted to show you the setup to make sure that everything stays in sync, because it's kind of clunky. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, I believe that Overbridge and software like it is the future of making music, especially within the hybrid studio, which I know to a lot of you six stringers out there, it's probably just called a studio, but we're getting all electronic up in here. And speaking of the future of making music, this video is sponsored by GPU Audio, which is coming in hot with some new technology that I'll be telling you more about later. Okay, so for my secondary elektron device with Overbridge on it, right now I'll be using the Digitact, and I'll also show this on the Syntakt to show you my actual main setup to show you from scratch. TLDR, you're sending audio out of the Octatrack into the inputs of another elektron device that has Overbridge. But what gets clunky is your audio routing within a DAW, and more importantly are the sync issues, because you can send audio out of whatever synth into the Digitact or the Syntakt and it'll send it over the USB. That's fine, right? But what you don't want is you don't want your secondary elektron device, in this case the Digitact or the Syntakt, to act as the primary clock. You always want that to be your DAW, because if this is your primary, it does not end well. So what I've done is I've used this really cheap Digital Life USB to Midi adapter, so I get full control over its latency. You don't need something expensive like an ERM, which is what I usually use, and I've actually put a few links to some of my favorite cheaper alternatives down in the description below that like button. And be sure to double check that your audio interface doesn't already have a MIDI output on the back, because if it does, then you don't need the ERM, you don't need this USB thing, or any of the stuff that I listed below. All right, let's go one step at a time and tackle audio routing first, and then we'll jump to the sync issues. So you, of course, should have downloaded Overbridge already and had that up and running, right? I'm not going to cover that here because there's a million videos online about it, so we don't need that going. Next up, after you've done that and you've installed the appropriate plugin for whatever you need, I'm going to just go ahead and hit Command F, and I'm going to search for, in this case, Digitact, right? Digitact, boom, boom, drag that over. And once this is over, let me put these on, we should have sound, right? So what's cool, right? All my sounds from the Digitact are coming in here. If I press play, oh, right, we'll ignore all this for now. Ignore that. So I'll press play. You can see it starts running. We're good to go. Awesome. So this is where things get fun. I'm gonna then take another audio track, right? And I'm just gonna, I'm gonna label this Octatrack. So, audio from. Let me go ahead and put this in geezer mode so you can really see what I'm doing here. Turn this up even more. We'll get rid of this bad boy and this, and we don't need you or you. So audio from, we're gonna look for the Digitact. Where are you at? Right here, number 20 Digitact. That's the plugin we just loaded. But under that, we can then listen to specific tracks or the input of the Digitact. So now that I have this, nothing's going to happen yet, but you can see that we have audio coming in. So we're going to set our monitoring to on. And this is the sound that I have here on the Octatrack. Let me make sure I can zoom in and get this right on the money. Slices. All right, sweet. So that's this audio. But what you'll notice is that if we go onto the Digitact, our monitoring is set to know. It's not monitoring anything. And that's one of the benefits of this setup, is that you don't need to send any audio into the Digitact and have the Digitact play it back before it gets here. This is kind of bypassing that whole setup. And what's crazier is, actually, no, I'll save that for later because I don't want to overload you. That's essentially what getting audio from our Digitact is. And then if we were to go and play something in here, right? They're in two separate tracks. And you can again take this further and separate all the tracks, which is what I've done for my Syntakt, which is why that looks like this, which is a monstrosity because there's so many tracks on the Syntakt. But that is how I get it onto the Digitact. Now let's kind of focus in on some sync issues. The main problem here is that when I press play, you can see that this runs and this isn't running, right? Ableton Live's our primary clock. This is kind of secondary, or third, whatever. There's some magic that happens with the Overbridge plugin to keep this super duper locked in. But where the magic stops is at the MIDI ports, because if I were to go MIDI out of here into MIDI in of the Octatrack, things start falling apart. This is on a completely different completely different like latency amount versus the Octatrack. So that's where I start bringing out something like this, right, which is a USB to MIDI adapter. This is a nice cheapy one I found online, link to it down below. There's a bunch of different options, expensive and cheap. This is probably the cheapest one I could find, and it still works, which is great. So let's go ahead and tackle some of the sync issues. But before we do that, let me give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, GPU Audio. Like I said at the beginning of the video, GPU Audio is coming in hot from the future to show us the way. They're the world's first startup dedicated to unlocking the immense power of your computer's graphics card for audio processing. Now, I won't get into the crazy nerdy stuff here, but TLDR, it's a new way forward in music making, utilizing the mega powerful processing capabilities of your somewhat sleeping GPU during the music making process. What GPU Audio has developed is a new way to take DSP algorithms and parallel process them across the thousands of GPU cores. No more wild CPU spikes in Ableton Live. Remember those? Because I do. They still happen once in a while. So what's so special about a GPU versus a CPU? Why would I bother? Well, compared to your CPU, which may only have 4 to 16 cores, GPUs have hundreds, if not thousands, of smaller cores that run in parallel, giving it a super high computing power. This means your CPU works a lot less and your GPU works a little more. This gives the new generation of audio plugins, software, and even cloud-based platforms to have exponentially more power than what they currently have. And with that, GPU Audio have an early access program for you to try the technology for yourself right now, starting with a free FIR convolution reverb. And within a few weeks, they will release a complete suite of audio plugins in their open beta. So if you're interested, head over to earlyaccess.gpu.audio to sign up and get the reverb plugin for free and be the first to be notified about the beta suite release. And I also put a link down to their site in the description below. All right, let's get back into the video. So with this specific one here, I'm going to take the MIDI in and I'm going to set it to our out. Well, honestly, you don't even really need that part. The main part you need to worry about is the MIDI input of your Octatrack. So this has a small label on it, says out. It's kind of hard to see. If it doesn't work one way, you try it out the other way. So now that this is plugged in and we have it plugged into our USB port, we're going to go over to our link, tempo, and MIDI tab in our Ableton Live preferences and look for this thing, whatever it is. It doesn't even have a name. And the most important thing you want to check is make sure that sync is checked. Sync is going to keep tempo, send transport control, which is play, stop, and as well as the tempo, right? All the start, stop messages. And then track is if you want to send notes out of your DAW to play whatever device it is. In this case, we do not want that at all. So now listen to this. Whoa. But we've gotten a step closer, right? We have this moving in time. If I go to our project, we go to our MIDI sync, we want to make sure that receive is set to on and our clock is receive is also set to on. We want to receive all that information from our DAW. I'm going to go ahead and clear out this triggers of this track, and in here I'm going to mute everything except the kick. So if I put down a very simple pattern and we press play, these are meant to be directly on, but they're not. So how are we gonna tackle this? It's really, really, really simple. We're gonna record arm our Octatrack track. I'm putting down a sound on the 1, 5, 9, and 13 steps, so it should just be dead on the money. Our Octatrack is just kind of there for tempo. We honestly don't even really need that to be in existence, because what we're trying to nail is latency for just the Octatrack. So listen to this. I'm gonna go ahead and record a clip. We'll check it out. And we can see here how far off this really is, right? If I zoom into this, highlight the section, I'm gonna hit Z, this step is actually, or this sound is actually meant to be here. So we can zoom in even more, and I can highlight from here to the beginning of this sound, and if I look down here, it says 42. That means this is 42 milliseconds late. Let me also make a quick note that you never want to take the measurement off of the first step, because that one's always going to be late no matter what. So from here, now that we got our measurement, which is 42 milliseconds late, we'll go back to our preferences in the Link MIDI tab, and under output of USB MIDI interface, not the input, the output, right? We're sending MIDI out into this thing. We want to delay or pull forward that clock by how much? You guessed it. Crap, I forgot it. I don't even know what the 42. All right, let's do that. Yes, 42 milliseconds. And it's plus or minus, right? We'll have to figure it out. So now I'm gonna go ahead and delete that track. Do this over one more time. Here, the first one was weird, but now look at that, right on the money. Boom, so close, little early. By how much? 1 millisecond. So I'm gonna go in here, highlight that, push it up, minus 41 instead. Now let's try this again. And there will always be a little bit of leeway between the timing, unless you use something really, really stable like the ERM multi-clock. But hey, we're on a budget, beats on a budget, this works. Look at that. Now let's unmute our kick. Right? It's right on there. Right, before I get too carried away, this is essentially the idea. We're just taking a measurement of a very simple pattern of this, recording it, seeing how far off it is, and then just going to our MIDI settings of this device and pushing it back by however much time, oh boy, however much time live tells us we need to move it by, which is this number right here. That's how many milliseconds we need to move it by. So we'll pull it back. Sometimes it might be 90 milliseconds. Sometimes it could be 100 milliseconds. Sometimes it could be 17 milliseconds or 3 milliseconds. It just kind of depends on whatever the device is, how old it is, and how quickly it can respond to MIDI messages and what it does. I mean, there's so much weird processing that happens with a ton of these things. So boom, we handled it. We got this locked in. We got audio over USB, right? We can have a tiny little simple setup right here with some short audio cables. No need to worry. And if you wanted to take this to kind of like the next level setup, let me plug in the Syntakt and show you how I have that set up with my Octatrack and all that stuff inside Ableton Live. All right, 1 second. All right, man, look at this setup with the black and red. That looks super clean. So this setup, same ideas, basically just a little more advanced. If I press play, right, we got our Octatrack, and we got all the sounds coming out of here. But if I open up this Syntakt group, what's wild here is let me get rid of this here. I have all the sounds on their own audio channels. So you know how when we went to make our Octatrack, we said take audio from Digitact. In this case, we're taking it from the Syntakt. In that secondary audio from section, where we were able to select the input, you actually have access to all the tracks plus the effects. So this is super duper beneficial. That way you can go in and build a crazy template like this. I got too lazy and didn't even bother naming everything. But what this allows you to do is then say we're here, I can go and highlight all this audio stuff, plus my Octatrack, record arm it, and just record in a performance, but then go back and edit it after the fact. So let's say this was, right, let me go ahead and mute this up. Let's go ahead and quantize that. Copy this, paste it here. Right. Sure, I got a bunch of stuff going on. There's a bunch of empty tracks, of course, but then you have everything completely separated. So if we go onto our Syntakt, we mute everything on this. If we press play, we still hear everything because it's all recorded in here. And if I solo it, we just have track 5, which is our open hat. We have just our kick. We have our claps. Everything is completely separated, and we can just perform live, do whatever the heck we want, hit record, let it run, play it all in, and then edit it after the fact. So that's why I love stuff like Overbridge, because this is all happening over the USB, which is so crazy to me. Because if this wasn't here, like look at this. Like what the heck is this? Like look at this wild setup. That's it. Look at that. Let me even zoom in on that. Look at that. That's crazy, right? It's just like, that's it, right? You just have USB power and all the power you need to make a crazy track. So that's why I love stuff like Overbridge. I think it's crazy and it's amazing. And then allowing us to just take something else that doesn't have that and in a way give it that functionality. Again, if you have an audio interface, completely pointless. Just go straight into the audio interface. You're done. But this setup has just been really fun, especially because a tiny setup like this on this side of my desk, right, and not have to worry about running crazy cables across to my patch bay or anything like that from over here. So yeah, anyway, I appreciate you. I hope you found this video helpful. Hopefully it wasn't too crazy. There's a lot of information packed into this one. You might need to watch it again. If you have any other questions, leave them down in the comments below. Let me know. Shout out again GPU Audio for sponsoring this video and allowing me to continue doing what I love to do. And shout out to you, my friend, for always coming by and hanging out. Again, I appreciate you more than you would ever know. And until next week, my friend, you already know the drill. Share the love, share the knowledge. Knowledge is power. Peace. All right, let's see where we're at.